Oh, good morning, Attorney Griggs.
Morning.
Here we go again. Just when we make a couple of steps ahead, here we go with some more police nonsense. So, this latest debacle, Rica police using black men as target practice. I already know your thoughts, but I want to get your thoughts on what occurred there in Rica.
Yeah, my thoughts were I was completely disturbed and disgusted. Yesterday I started looking into my inbox and my DMs on all social platforms, and people were sending me a Facebook post from the Villa Rica Police Department for an event that they had. I believe it was Police Citizens Academy and target practice with black men as the targets. And so I reached out to the Carroll County NAACP. They were already aware of it. And then we reached out to the department and the mayor's office to make sure they understood that this was completely unacceptable and that we want a meeting with all parties involved immediately. And that started the firestorm that we have been seeing. People were in the comments on Facebook. Subsequently, they took the photos down, but that's not enough. I mean, for them to feel comfortable enough to use black men as target practice for a police citizens academy speaks volumes of that department and the need for change and racial sensitivity and diversity training immediately.
You know, the police chief said, in a way to kind of, I guess, diffuse the situation a bit, that these target practice images were delivered by the state. So is that more alarming to you than
That's
not?
that's absolutely more alarming. And again, federal partners have said over and over again, this type of training undergirds, intentional bias, implicit bias built into law enforcement. And that's what we've been talking about, forever, that we need to address these things. So if the state of Georgia was providing these targets, we need to have a conversation with the Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, the Attorney General, and the International Chiefs of Police, because this is unacceptable. It builds in bias already to think that black men are the target whenever you are dealing with any type of citizen law enforcement interaction or now citizen-citizen interaction. And in a state where 33% of the population is African American and a large groundswell are peaceful and law-abiding, they should not walk around with targets on their back simply because of people's implicit bias.
The way that I received it when I saw it, and just like you, I got hit up with these images, and I was shocked because I saw this type of thing happen in two other states. But what occurred to me was when Earth, Wind, and Fire rehearses for a show at Mercedes-Benz, they rehearse the show just as they're going to perform it. When the Falcons rehearse at the Mercedes-Benz, they practice just the way they're going to play it on Sunday afternoon. When Villa Rica rehearses and practices to shoot black men, that's what they're going to do when they're in the field.
Absolutely. You practice how you play. And the concern that we have is, in a state where they say we love the Second Amendment, we have open right to carry, everyone has that right. And so for the police to be training to shoot black men who happen to have weapons or who happen to fit some type of profile is training for the behavior that they're going to do out on the street. So you can't say, oh, we didn't think this was a problem, because you're actually training for this type of situation. And that's what, the African-American community and supporters of equality and diversity and inclusion have been fighting against. And so there needs to be a real conversation that leads to change. And if the conversation doesn't lead to change, there will be other actions that will lead to change. Villa Rica is a suburb of Atlanta. And so Carroll County has a growing minority population. Of course, Douglas has a growing minority population, and Paulding does as well. We're talking about diversity all over this state. And for certain individuals within law enforcement to think this was appropriate, again, they only removed it after they felt the backlash from the community. Namely, the first individuals that were posting were citizens from Carroll County, and citizens from the city of Villa Rica. So they need to understand that you represent the community as guardians and protectors, not an occupying force, not individuals that are hunting a certain group of the community. And so we have to make sure that that message is clear and clarion to them, and that there will be consequences if this type of behavior continues. There are a lot of tools in the NAACP's tool belt. The first one is to sit down and have a meeting to get an understanding of what is appropriate in this state. If that doesn't work, then advocacy and activism and litigation will follow.
You said something that's key, and I've been saying this all along, not just as a person in the media, but just as a Black man, because I've had my encounters with police for absolutely nothing in my television truck, plainly marked. And I got called upon at a gas station because a white guy said that I was in a suspicious vehicle. And they came to me, at me, with guns drawn in Douglas County, in which our company is registered. So I always said that I felt hunted as a Black man. When I drive down the street, my heart starts palpitating. I've done nothing wrong. I'm a law-abiding citizen. But it's just something about the fact that when a cop peers over and looks at you, you don't know what's on his radio, what's on his scanner, what they're looking for, who they're looking for. Do you fit the description? All of those type of things that add angst when you're driving down the street. And, I can understand the movement of Cop City and all these other things. And I'm not saying that whatever side of the fence you sit on, as it relates to that movement, I can understand why people might be opposed to it when we see things like this occur.
Yeah, there does not need to be the further militarization and targeting of law enforcement on a specific community. And just to be clear, my position on Cop City is it should not be built, and that elected officials should listen to the will of the community. In 2020, the largest civil rights demonstration in the history of the state, and let's not take that lightly, because this is the state that birthed civil rights. The largest demonstration, civil rights demonstration in this state's history, was about police brutality and police accountability. I think that elected officials and members of the executive branch, which law enforcement would be, need to understand that the citizens are tired of this. We are tired of this. And what they need to understand is that actions will be taken, peaceful and nonviolent, but actions will be taken to end this continued brutality, this continued insensitivity to the issue that citizens are raising. I spent yesterday, a better part of yesterday, with the Department of Justice, reiterating the need for federal intervention. And so for local law enforcement who think this is appropriate, just know that there will be ramifications on the federal level, because there are protections for African Americans and people of color against this type of use of the color of law to perpetrate such atrocities on our community. So my message, and the message of the Georgia State Conference, as well as the Carroll County NAACP, is we're done dying. And this type of behavior needs to stop. If it does not stop, we will be taking appropriate action that will lead to the termination of officers, the charging of officers when they violate the law, and the holding of departments accountable for the patterns and practices of racial discrimination. I need only point to what happened in Minneapolis a couple weeks ago when the Department of Justice concluded its patterns and practice investigation. And now there has to be a consent agreement under the federal court where a certain police department will be monitored and certain individuals are going to be terminated and the city will be held liable. And so I think that the taxpayers need to understand that the cost of doing racially insensitive business just went up.
That's amazing, man. And you said something that's key when we first started, which is the comfortability that they had in putting this out there. Because ironically, it's not like somebody went to the training camp and shot this video on the sneak. Rica police posted this on their Facebook page. I want people to clearly understand that they posted this. So they were clearly comfortable with the fact that they used Black people, Black men in particular, as target practice.
Yeah, and they were so comfortable that even in removing it, the suggestion of I believe the chief, was for people to come to the training. No, 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 no. We don't need to come to the training. You need to meet with the community and get a full understanding of what the community expects from law enforcement, not what law enforcement can teach the community. There's nothing that law enforcement needs to teach the community when you are using these type of tactics. What needs to happen is City of Villa Rica needs to adopt a 21st century policing model, where the police are guardians and not warriors in the community, where the police see community-oriented policing as going to the community and getting input from the community as to how they would like to have police interactions, not the community coming to the police. And so what I would say to them and what I say to your audience is this: after all of the incidents that happened in 2020 and us moving forward, we are in a different climate. Yes, there are certain individuals that want to go back to an old climate. We're not going back to the old climate. And those individuals need to understand they will be held accountable, just like the police were held accountable in Minneapolis and Louisville and other places. The police will be held accountable here because they are accountable to the people. And so, for them to feel comfortable enough to post that on their social channels, I think they feel very uncomfortable now that the citizens' voices have spoken loud and clear, and the NAACP is not requesting a meeting. We are demanding a meeting, and it needs to happen immediately.
I think people sometimes, and I hate to make things about black and white, but it is what it is. And a lot of white friends that I talk to sometimes believe that we as black people, black men in particular, we overreact to certain things. We want to racialize everything. It's not always a racial situation. And I beg to differ. I found this picture, this whole situation more than offensive. I found it frightening, to be quite honest with you. And I don't think that they totally understand that. And the fact that this institution was so free, again, to put it out there, shows the systemic racism and the implicit bias that you spoke to that's there. A white cop and is a black guy that looks like a guy in that target practice. He's a suspect because subliminally he's already conditioned to look at that black man as a target. I mean, and for anybody that doesn't understand that, I don't think the elevator is going all the way up to the top.
Yeah, and I think we as African Americans need to stop worrying about whether or not, and certain people would understand our experience. For 400 years, we've dealt with an experience that is unique to our community. And we know when we are under attack, we know when what they would call small things escalate into huge things. Listen, if they're being preconditioned to see African American men as targets and suspects, that leads on a spectrum that ultimately ends in death. We've seen it over and over again. And let me be clear, nothing changed after George Floyd. There were 1,200 police killings that year, 1,300 the next year, and 1,400 the next year. It's going up. And so for Black people to have the red flags out, it's important and they should be listened to. But we're not just asking for folks to listen. We are telling you, you are going to listen, because regardless of how comfortable you may feel in your alternative experience, Black people know when they've been brutalized and they know when more brutality is coming. And if you want to sit here and say it's not happening, go back to Dr. King's 1963 speech on the March on Washington, where he explicitly pointed out police brutality as one of the evils that Black people have to deal with on a daily basis. We are trying to get to a point where we as African Americans don't have to deal with that. So if that means that we're going to take every single incident and respond the way we need to respond, that's exactly what we're going to do, because I know I'm tired of going to funerals. I know the Black community is tired of going to funerals and then to be gaslit to say, oh, it's not a problem or it's an isolated incident. Well, if it's an isolated incident, why does it keep happening? And so my message is this: we will be hyper vigilant until this issue is resolved. And clearly there's an issue in Villa Rica that needs to be resolved before we have to go to another funeral.
Well said. Attorney Gerald Griggs, president of the Georgia chapter of the NAACP, always on the issues. this is something that unfortunately crossed your desk and it crossed mine as well. Our paths cross almost every week with something new. And onward and upward. That's all I can say. Continue pressing on, man, and we'll be right there, right there with you.
I appreciate you, brother, and I appreciate you always having us on the platform. And the last message I would give to your viewers is this. We are in a difficult time, but of course, with the strength and resolve of our ancestors, we've come through difficult times before. We should not be disheartened. And when incidents like this happen, it summons us to gird up the courage of our ancestors, to push back and to make sure folks understand this will not be normalized, and anyone who does it will be held accountable. And trust and believe the Georgia State Conference will be the first ones to say something and the first ones to do something.
We appreciate you, sir. Be well, and until next time.
All right, appreciate you too, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.